The UTA School of Architecture presents Next, its 2021 to 22 lecture series. These lectures explore what's next from perspectives that include issues relating to the pandemic, navigation and shifts in our social culture, and transformations in response to climate change. Discussions and work represent thoughtful and creative production that challenges the discipline. Next advocates for new and progressive approaches that expand upon normative practice and underscore a commitment of scholarship and inquiry from the School of Architecture.
We started our practice, we call it Rome Office, began in 2016. And, as Charles said, I think we really have faith in a process that we've developed over time, inherited from other offices and made our own. And essentially what we're trying to do is find a contextually conscious, unique design that provides memorable experiences for their users. And while we aren't limited to the Southeast, I think our mission has been to really focus on the Southeast. Melissa's from South Carolina, I'm from Louisiana, and I think we just find the region really rich, and the opportunity for us in terms of using our experience in our past lives in a meaningful way here is really what inspires us to come in every day. As mentioned, our most recent past live, which had a really profound impact on us, was at Big. We joined in the inception of the New York office when it first started with 6 people. When we left, there was about 180 people. It was every 3 months or 6 months, it seemed like we're knocking down another wall and building more IKEA desks to invite more people into the office. This image here was taken at a time where I think it seemed like the perfect sort of, culture and combination of size, and the work being done on the project was just really amazing to be a part of. Of course, at being such a young office, we got a lot of responsibilities early on in our careers for really iconic projects. This one here is the Vancouver House project, which Melissa was project architect on and I was a project designer on. And these are amazing projects where you're really pushing the boundaries of architecture and construction. So this is in Vancouver. It's got a 100-foot cantilever, vertically post-tensioned in a seismic zone. Definitely had a budget, but one that we don't really play with anymore in our own practice. But these are decade-long projects, take an enormous amount of effort and time. And while it's rewarding in terms of what you learn, they're few and far between. We had a lot of opportunities to work on plenty of, masterpiece projects, or what would have been masterpiece projects had they been built. And these things often get canceled, whether that's right after concept, or even in construction. For some of these, you feel like you're in 2 years. Oh, we're getting out of the ground, we're going to do it, and then all of a sudden, nope, it's done. And so that can be a little bit of a downer. And I think for Melissa and I specifically, just thought we could be more useful to the built environment. And I think after 10 years and then some, of being at these wonderful places, we decided to we decided to say our goodbyes and come to New Orleans to start our own practice and see if we can make an impact on what we presume would be a smaller scale. And so on the 10th anniversary of the firm, we said our goodbyes. We packed everything in a van and we came down south. And so I think what we'll do is we'll run through a few projects that I think highlight the transition. Our work is pretty, it strikes a broad range, and I think our past lives really enable us to select a wide range of program types and project types and scales. We worked on everything from small houses to, 10 million square foot master plans. And I think what it taught us is really to believe in the process, to ask the right questions, and you really, can do almost any project type if you build the right team. So I'll let Melissa start with this first project we call Higher Powerhouse.
Right, so this was one of our very first projects in the office, and it was our first foray into historic renovation. The client came to us with a desire to transform an old power plant into a multifunctional event space for a local church group. And although the scale and the medium were somewhat foreign to us, like Brian said, the design process and approach largely remained the same. It was a great segue into the type of work that we were wanting to pursue as an office, so local, modestly scaled, and meaningful. The project is located in Columbia, South Carolina, within the Bull Street development. It's an urban infill that's still ongoing, and it's the largest city center development east of the Mississippi. The development is approximately 181 acres and was the former campus of the South Carolina State Lunatic Asylum. Our building was the former power plant that served all the buildings on the campus and one of several historic structures that the client was looking to save. And I mean, in addition to being a radically cool building to convert, it was planned to be the lone structure within a newly planned central park of sorts, giving it a sense of privilege and notoriety. And in order to get that point across to the client, we compared it to the Met in Central Park. The building itself is comprised of a collection of structures, a storage shed, giant cooling towers, and a greenhouse, all of which we really wanted to include in the transformation of the building. And there were inherent architectural features and details that we immediately fell in love with, such as the smokestacks and their cage-like structure, and the purely functional brick lattice work that was around the condenser yard. And the party of the building is fairly simple and somewhat cost-driven. We were limited to a $3 million budget for this project. Took the existing footprint, which is about 12,700 square feet, left the existing steel structure and placed the support program that was required within the building. We dispersed the program in different programmatic blocks to the exterior facade of the building and cropped it at the envelope. And where we cropped those boxes, we employed that same lattice brick detail at the facades. In order to bring in natural light to the deepest portion of the building, we included a series of skylights in the existing roof. And we transformed one of the program boxes into the altar or stage for the church group and utilized that central space between the program blocks as the assembly area. Using this Eastern programmatic block also allowed us to provide somewhat of a double-sided stage, which could provide an exterior assembly area as well. So here you see the plan of the building and the congregation area that inhabits the space between the program boxes. It could seat up to about 457 people. And the program boxes housed classrooms, a commercial kitchen, the church's administrative offices, bathrooms, and of course the stage. The program boxes, as they translated to the exterior of the building, became raised planters and changes in pavement. Here you see a model that we had created of the space. Obviously, it was our ambition to preserve the smokestacks and their structure within the building. This is a typical Sunday morning service render, and the finishes of the boxes on the interior were influenced by the ephemeral works of Robert Irwin. I don't know if y'all are familiar with his work, but really cool. boxes. This is a view on the flip side of things on a Saturday night at a concert in the space. Within one of the classrooms, looking out through the brick lattice work. And this is an idea of what we were thinking about for the site plan. You could see how we were transforming those ancillary spaces into amenities for the site as well, such as the condensing yard becoming an entry court, the cooling towers transformed into a reflection pool, and the storage shed with an event pavilion. And an image of an outdoor event and the main entry into that side courtyard.
So, that project really, really taught us something about, I guess, what our practice was going to be. On the one hand, it was so exciting to have someone reach out and say, hey, can you do something for us? On the other hand, it wasn't like, okay, Brian, we're gonna start working on World Trade Center 2. I need you on a call next week, to start this new, 2,000-foot tower. And that was fine by us, but it was really, at first, how are we going to make something out of this building? How are we going to instill an idea? And I think we were successful at that. The client was happy. That essentially the client hired us to sell someone on buying the church group to buy the building. We unfortunately had to transfer our design to an architect who was a parishioner, and they executed it in maybe not such a lovely way as we would imagine, so we don't show the finished product, but nevertheless, it was a good first step, and really piqued our interest in more adaptive reuse, which is advantageous down here in New Orleans for a couple reasons. One, it's a historic city, and two, there's incentives for owners to redevelop older buildings. And so we chased the next project, which is called the Schoolhouse. And it had all the same sort of challenges as the higher Powerhouse, how to transform an old structure that was built and designed for one function into a new function. Had the added complexity that the owner was going for tax credits. This building was in central New Orleans in a historic district. And essentially, if you're not familiar with tax credits, the government will give owners an incentive through tax credits to rehabilitate old buildings according to the standards of the National Park Service and the State Historic Preservation Office, something we were not familiar with at all. So having our first foray into adaptive reuse 3 months ago, we decided to bite off even another new item in terms of these new standards and to try to see what we could accomplish. This is the building in 2016 as we inherited it. It was an old schoolhouse, a neighborhood schoolhouse building of about 30,000 square feet. The interior was pretty much gutted. We quickly started to do our own little research on the building itself and on the standards for rehabilitation. We learned that not only does the government agencies have control over the exterior, but also the interior of what you can do. And that was a bit of a shock to us at first. How are we going to make something out of this? But essentially, what we're left with was trying to make something of the existing fabric, both exterior and interior. On the interior was a main corridor, hallway that existed, still framed for the schoolhouse. And on the exterior, there was still some of the original detailing. We did our research looking at all the different lives the building had, from schoolhouse to New Orleans Police Training Division. We've dug up old photographs of what the building once was, this whimsical Italianate structure with an East Lake porch, something we would never conceive of, but it was just so cool to see and inherit like this old structure. The way the classrooms were partitioned off and the space themselves, how the building functioned passively, and then looked at what was remaining of it. And so this almost became a two-part project. One, we had to make use and restore or rebuild all the existing historic fabric that existed. And early on, I think we had a strong desire to, as well as the owner, to bring it back to its original form, even though we didn't have to. And so we went through a full restoration of the envelope, put the entablature back on, rebuilt the parapet, the conical spires, the East Lake porch, refabricated all the historic wood windows, the metal hoods, and did a full restoration of the inside, of the exterior of the building. As you can see here, full tuck pointing. Learned terms that I'm sure our parents have asked us over the past years, what is that called? That somehow over the first 15 years of our lives, we never had to really understand or know. But then the second thing when we're doing research is to dig up some old plans of what the configuration on the inside was going to be. So there was a problem here to solve. The owner wanted to take this schoolhouse and make apartments out of it. And we knew we had a hurdle in terms of keeping the old corridor, which was about 12 feet wide, much wider than any corridor you would have in a modern day apartment building. So we soon decided, okay, really we're just left with the interior bones of this. And, thinking about its really primary use throughout its life as a schoolhouse, we wanted to somehow memorialize that condition and the historic classrooms. And instead of really modifying walls or adding new walls, we came with this additive approach where what if we just, added this machine into the classrooms that would then transform this building from, a collection of classrooms into a collection of apartments. And this became what we dubbed the box for living. So here you see a plan where we stamp it in each one of the classrooms on the floor, the wide hallway, and the box really works in multiple ways. So it's comprised of a wardrobe for the bedroom, kitchen, laundry, and access to the bathroom, divides the space in between, those functions, kitchen and living, and then also has the bathroom and a little bonus storage loft inside of the box. There's a traveling ladder that takes advantage of the height of these old schools. So all of our storage, no closets, everything is cabinetry built into this box. And then the mechanical and the service is all routed in there. So, your ceilings and those soffits, your classrooms are really void of any modern day mechanics. And so the result here, you can see that this sort of contemporary, detailed, modern box for living inserted into this old historic classroom that's been restored and renovated to its original condition. Looking at it from the bedroom side and the built-in wardrobe.
This also gave us a lot of flexibility with the windows at the historic envelope. So we didn't have to coordinate walls hitting at the correct location. Gave us the flexibility.
Yeah. And then sliding pocket doors to partition off between the bedroom and the living room. And then here you see the idea of that little bonus loft that you can get into that's carpeted, has lights, and we've talked to tenants who have used it in multiple different ways and was just really excited to see it actually being utilized. And then inside the bathroom, and then the corridor. So the corridor again was the interior detailing of a more traditional sense, rebuilding it back to its original condition. So there's really this duality between the historic fabric of the exterior and the interior, and this transition between the old and the new part of the apartment units. And then finally, to make this thing work, we really had to use every square inch of space. So there was a capacious attic space that we were able to disguise some skylights in and make some nice 2-bedroom units up in the attic space, which really helped the success of the development and make it pencil out. So here you see.
And that was the original gable roof structure.
Yeah, it was the original gable roof structure. We didn't create that gable roof. That was how it originally was. And one of the bathrooms there. And I think, to wrap that one up, it really, I think, sold us on the idea of this it's not really historic preservation, where we don't think of ourselves as preservationists. I think, you know, there's a story to be told in terms of sustainability and you know, how much you save in terms of waste on reusing an old structure, and the idea that you can take something that someone else had done and make it your own and give it a new life. And it's something that our office has really thrived on and has, you know, taken on more projects like that. So the next one, MCH, I'll give an intro real quick. So this is in Morgan City. Morgan City is about 80 miles southwest of New Orleans. The landscape down here is amazing in terms of, you know, how the sediment from all the different rivers have left these little peninsulas of land. But essentially, Morgan City is the gateway to the Gulf of Mexico in terms of the oil industry and seafood industry. It's known for you know, sportsman paradise for hunting and fishing, as well as the oil industry. And this, you know, contradicting, you know, these two industries coming together in the Louisiana Shrimp and Petroleum Festival is what they're known for, which just seem like, you know, two things that should not be combined, but somehow, you know, this idea, this romantic idea of this shrimp, you know, just embracing this industry that's just killing the ecosystem. But it's a very, you know, it's a very blue-collar town, and this project here was about how to create affordable housing in this really rural, edge-of-the-earth location. So here, our site, this is the extent of Morgan City. On the west, you see the river system. That's really industrial. A lot of ships get built, and on the other side of town is really the barrier between the marshlands and the city. It's much more serene and, you know, a little bit more, I guess, idyllic for a setting. And our site itself just felt like it had the same kind of quality. So you're surrounded by these, you know, not so nice buildings on one side, a high one on the other. But then in the upper left-hand image, you kind of see that's the levee protection system and beyond. And so there's this opportunity there, you know, to kind of mimic on a different, smaller scale our site compared to Morgan City.
And as Brian mentioned, you know, this is affordable. This was going to be affordable housing or low-income housing for seniors ages 55 and up. Mm-hmm. And we want to point out that affordable housing can mean a variety of things depending on where you're building. We pulled these two images earlier today to show a big project in Copenhagen on the left that has very nice wood-clad exteriors with individual terraces for each unit, as well as on the right, a Trahan project in New York City, where they're solving the affordable housing crisis with really nice interior wood finishes and panel-ready appliances and waterfall quartz, island counters. You know, this is not the world we were living in on this project. This is affordable housing in Morgan City. And we are talking about, you know, market rate affordable housing with budgets around $135 a square foot, yeah, which that might not mean a lot to you students out there, but it is very difficult to build anything for less than $150 a
yeah,
square foot.
This is our second affordable housing project. We completed one earlier this year. It was an adaptive reuse one. It's a project type that we're really passionate about here, and you know, we love challenges. We just didn't think it'd be that much of a challenge to do something interesting or nice. You know, ultimately you're providing much needed housing, but as Melissa said, this isn't subsidized. It's incentivized in a way through Louisiana Housing Corporation, but these are private developers that are trying to build housing units for low income families.
So the name of the game with regard to program, massing, apertures, FF&E is efficiency. And we were essentially given the program from the client and the Louisiana Housing Commission. So it was our job to figure out how to arrange it to maximize efficiency while also creating a unique, memorable, and welcoming space for the future residents. And we started out by comparing the double-loaded corridor model with that of a building with exterior circulation, both of which provided one-sided exposure. And lastly, we thought that there may be some efficiencies when it comes to light, air, and building envelope if we looked at a single loaded exterior corridor model with double-sided exposure. Sure enough, when we looked at the facade to area ratio of the double-sided model, it was more efficient than the others, so we decided to roll with that concept. Next was to place the building within the oversized site, and as Brian mentioned, the site is bordered on two sides by undesirable commercial development and a loud highway. However, to the east is was a large vacant lot with views to the levee and marshlands beyond. So this became a driving factor not only in the siting of the building, but also in its mass. So with regard to massing, here you see a typical double-loaded corridor divided into two bars. We hinged or split that open to create a courtyard between and exterior circulation, which optimized solar exposure for both bars and highlighted that primary view out to the marshlands. We hinged again at the corners, which created exterior covered circulation for the residents. And in order to activate that courtyard space, we kind of saw it as an extension of the living room of all of the different units. So we placed the more active program of the living rooms along the courtyard side and the more private program of sleeping along the street side. We created distinct unit entries for each one of the units by creating somewhat of a sawtooth facade along the courtyard. This also provided a certain orientation of the units towards the courtyard and that view out to the marshlands, but also created unit visibility as you were entering from the main entrance of the building. So here you see, I want to say a typical plan. There are only two floors. This is the ground floor, and you can see how we tried to create a really nice room and gathering space in that central courtyard as an extension of the units themselves. A typical unit, as I mentioned, had the living room oriented towards the courtyard. Bathroom and services were located at the deepest portion of the unit, and the bedroom was located along the street facade. This allowed us to create, again, this idea of cross ventilation throughout the units. And here's an image of the main entry to the building. It's a pretty large building, and so the way to articulate it in our minds was to step it out slightly as you went up to make it look like a variety of stacked volumes on top of each other, and we enhanced that through the saturation or hue of each level being amplified a little bit as you went up. This is a view as you're coming out of the elevator to access your unit on the second floor. So you can see this idea of being able to see the unit entry numbers as you walk down the corridor, each person being able to identify their own unit, but also using the corridors as a gathering space and also to activate that interior courtyard. The courtyard contains different programs from a community garden to kind of spread out play structures to keep the whole area busy throughout the day and throughout the year.
So we have ambition to use our skill set that we had in the past in terms of more prominent, larger scale projects. There's currently two that I think fit that. This one here, Eloise, and another larger museum event space that we're currently working on. This one was a invited competition for a new headquarters building in Greenville, South Carolina, which is in the upstate, close to the Blue Ridge Mountains. It was one that we won. Greenville is, when you think of Greenville, it's a very, got really good automotive industry there. It's got lots of access to outdoor space, very family friendly, and becoming more of a destination for travelers and leisure, and not just industry. It's got really good temperatures and weather, and so it's really, I don't know, I hate to use the term, but it's really put itself on the map over the last 10 years when you think about it in terms of what it offers. And like I was just pointing out, there's been an urban renewal. It's right close to the mountains, and has a lot of outdoor activities and upscale amenities. Our site was right in the middle of the crown jewel of Greenville, and that's North Main Street. So you can see that red site on the cross of North Main and Washington, right in the center of downtown. Downtown Greenville in the 80s was basically a commercial, corridor, wide lanes. The textile industry had sort of moved out, and the downtown area was in a pretty steep decline. The city hired Lawrence Halpern to come in and really transform the whole downtown area. And he had some pretty notable projects at that point that he was working on in terms of revitalizing some downtowns. And it was one of the smartest things I think Greenville did is hiring him. Here is Main Street today. It's a lively, friendly, walkable destination with lots of activity. And so our site being right in the center of it, there was a sensitivity to doing something large scale. So our challenge was to fit about a 220,000 square foot office building with parking in the middle of downtown, which is at mostly a smaller scale. There are some larger buildings, for instance, the one right across the street, which our client had owned as well, as an example. And without really telling him directly, we really thought it was a pity the way that the facade went straight up. It was pretty imposing on the downtown Main Street. And so we wanted to be sensitive to that when we're developing our site across the street. It's a corner site, but fairly small in terms of dimension and area for the program and for parking. But as I mentioned, it was important to us to relate the context of the street wall and the podium for the parking and some of the office spaces. And then from there to build up the main program of the anchor tenant, the office space. And it was really through just a simple move in order to control and calibrate that. So the client wanted as large of an office plate as they could for each one of their floors. And so what we decided to do is use this kind of rotation technique to calibrate that. So the more we rotated it, the smaller it got, but also it set back from the street facades and became off grid with the streets, which we thought did a good job of breaking up the massing. The speculative office program, we just copied that same move, rotated the box within a box, made this the smallest dimension we thought we could from facade to core, and still have a multi-tenant configuration, which again broke up the massing as it went up. We inset those first floors, which gave us larger outdoor terraces, sort of felt in line with Lawrence Halpern's thinking about gardens outside, and instead of a roof access, you really have these nice amenities off of your office floor.
But also an amenity that people were looking for in Greenville at the time.
Exactly. And so this model here really represents sort of our design intent to the client at the time of the final presentation. This anchored podium that relates to the context with these two floating boxes above that break down the massing and disappear in the tree line above. So here we're looking at one of the renders we did in the competition to sort of show that idea of the heavy base with the floating boxes. Another image of it at nighttime, and then on the corner from the day as well. And then the final sort of move that we did was for the anchor tenant to free up space in the corner. We relocated their entry directly across from a pedestrian walkway that went to the plaza across the street. We connected all the lower level parking directly by stair, so you could actually get out of your car, walk down a few levels, and go to the lobby to get access to your elevator. So here you see that slit on the side as being the main entry for the anchor tenant, which freed up space on the corner for more public amenities and retail program. Here you're inside that lobby, looking up that grand stair that connects the parking levels and the retail space next to it. Then quickly with the plans, again, you see that idea of the entry really frees up a lot of usable, valuable retail space for the owner on the corner. And then the main anchor tenant space with its rotated box, and then the spec office being broken down into its smaller facade to core length with multi-tenant configuration and an idea of the terrace. And then for the anchor tenant, communicating stair, which we feel like are in every single project these days, and so we kind of hesitate to do it, but nevertheless, it's for 4 floors that are trying to be social and connective, it is a successful way to kind of introduce that that sort of vertical campus. And again, looking at it from East Washington down.
Okay, so lastly, we'd like to share with you all a project that is near and dear to our hearts. It's the project that started our office 6 years ago, and we're still working on it. But it's the South Carolina Botanical Garden Treehouse Memorial. And it's located in Clemson, South Carolina, which is my hometown. And it's right at the base of the Blue Ridge Mountains, similar to Greenville. This is where the South Carolina Botanical Garden is located, and the treehouse site itself is almost perfectly centered within the garden. The garden is a beautifully arranged collection of native plants spanning from all regions of the state, and there are several land art installations nestled throughout as well.
The impetus for the project was really out of tragic loss of our nephew, and some friends had gotten together and donated a little bit of money. I want to say about $3,000 to the gardens to put something in the gardens to memorialize the loss of that child. They asked us to take a look at what we would do, and this idea of a treehouse was kind of the only thing we had to go off of. But in conversations with the family, I think what we learned is that what really got everyone through was the idea of sharing the loss with other people who've gone through similar situations. And the more you talk about it, the more you realize how many people have gone through similar incidences. So the project kind of grew. How can we take this idea of a treehouse and make more of it something that can both be a memory and a journey for people that have had loss, but also to celebrate the path of life for those kids and children who are still with us.
So again, when we're looking to redefine something or make something new out of maybe a typology that people think they understand. Maybe people think they have this idea in their head of what a tree house is. So we said, let's start out from the beginning. Where did tree houses originate? How have people used them over time? And how can that influence how we treat ours moving forward? So here's a zoom-in look at our site. You see the 4 trees highlighted in green there. That was essentially where they wanted to locate the tree house, somewhere around there, next to the children's garden. The site kind of looks out over this open meadow, and it's the edge of a wooded area that's really underutilized in the garden and leads down to a ravine. So here are some photos of the edge of that meadow and the wooded area, and you can see the sloping terrain that's existing on the site. Again, the image on the left here is looking kind of down towards the ravine. You can't see it because there are fallen trees everywhere. Again, like I said, this is a very underutilized portion of the garden. So new territory for them in terms of bringing people out here. And we thought it was really great. We said, well, you know, people are here and they're coming to this children's garden. Let's pull them from there and have the journey of the tree house, bring people out to experience the trees and the canopies of the trees over this ravine. So here you can see a plan of where we ended up locating the treehouse structure itself. And the way that we did that was to look at the existing trees that were on the site and provide enough of an offset from their trunks to assume where their root systems might be located and to properly locate where the footings of our structure might land. And, you know, the idea was to carry people through the tree canopy, so we wanted to wind around these trees as well. So the site really drove the form of house and these gathering spaces. So I guess how we ended up interpreting what a treehouse was to create this journey into the woods, create gathering spaces for learning and reflection, and to also experience the sight and sounds of the garden.
Yeah, I think we saw so many examples of things as path, whether it's museum, like the Jewish Museum in Berlin, or the FDR Memorial in DC, and we thought that the path really had a good connection to the story and could be a vehicle as an interpretation of a treehouse, or work well.
And so I'm sure everyone's familiar with Shigeru Bond's work, especially this project, the Pompidou Center in Metz, France. We had originally envisioned the structure as being steel, but because of our budget constraints, we started looking at glulam. And because we were entering construction documents during the pandemic, the cost of wood, specifically southern yellow pine, just skyrocketed. So what we ended up looking at for this project and specifying was bamboo. So glulam bamboo, structurally engineered bamboo, which is what's used in this project here. And it's used commonly throughout Asia and Europe, but it really hasn't made its way over to the United States yet.
For structures, yeah.
Right. But for us, a new company is just formed in Missouri, of all places, that does do the manufacturing of the structurally engineered members in their factory locally here in the United States. They source the material from South America, but it's still much more sustainable to get it from there than it is from Asia. And so what we did in this specific project to get the tight radii that we were looking for at the platforms was to reduce the thickness of each ply of bamboo to its smallest form so that it could be bent along those curves as tight as possible.
Yeah, the complex curves were really something we're struggling with the southern yellow pine, because, you know, the lumber has a dimension to it, the plies have a dimension to it, so it might be, you know, 5/8 to 1 inch thick, but then it's 6 inches, and so it really only bends in one direction. And so you have to like turn the wood each time you want to bend it in another direction, where glulam is more of a square profile and cross shape, and so you can see more complex curves out of the glue that's being built in Europe, because primarily they're using those smaller square profiles, either in wood or bamboo. And so that became a really breakthrough moment for us in terms of the form of this.
Right. And so the support structure underneath each one of those platforms is meant to mimic the trees around it. You know, we have these select branches reaching out to the perimeter of these platforms, all made out of bamboo as well. And we really like to build things in our office. This is a one-to-one mock-up of what one of those arms might feel like. And this is a larger scale model as well that we use to study the details of how all these elements were going to be coming
Yeah, it was really important to, not just design the top, but the underside because, I think the opportunity is to inhabit underneath will be just as exciting as being on top of the structure.
Right. And so, the design of all the smaller elements like the railing, we wanted it to go away so it doesn't have any posts along the way. It's just all of the pickets running the entire length of the railing. And then a small memorial to children that have been lost through memorial footprints that walk along this journey with you as you traverse the structure. This is an image of how we've been developing one of the platforms and kind of notating each one of those arms that are each different. It will be made off-site and kind of trucked in.
Yeah, it's just going to be
put
erected.
In place. Yeah. So this is the feel. Going in the 3 different platforms for gathering, learning, and reflecting. The reflecting platform, which is where the path culminates, it has a memorial disc at the end that reflects the sky above. And like Brian said, we wanted to utilize underneath the structure as well for garden programming, fun swings that are made out of wood from trees that may have needed to be taken down because of the structure. Climbing on each one of those column arms, and again, reusing some of the wood from the site for gathering or seating larger platforms.